Hi, everybody. David Nour. Want to welcome you along with my business partner, Jenn Cordz, to another episode of our Intelligent Growth. Hello, Jenn.
Hi, Nour. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Good to see you. And we're joined by a fabulous guest today. Casey Foss is with West Monroe. Hello, Casey.
Hi, Nour. Hi, Jen. It's really good to be here today.
It
Good to
is.
see you guys.
It's great to have you. And for our audience, we're really excited about this episode. We're going to talk a lot about consistency and discipline and focus and all of that we see in this investing in this idea of repeatability. I think repeatability as a topic is one of those that's right up there with motherhood and apple pie, right? We don't run to anybody who's going to argue with, nope, that's dumb, not interested, not going to do that. And yet collectively, when we talk to executives or we peel back the onion and spend time with companies, you just don't see it. And you don't see it consistently kind of applied. So the topic is really investing in repeatability. And as we'll talk about this idea of digital and digital transformation and optimizing business processes and go-to-market strategies, we believe this topic is going to be really relevant to our audience as well as those that are interested in really leveling up what they do, how they do it, and how they show up. Just as a quick reminder, I'm writing a Forbes column that features Casey and West Monroe. So I hope you'll check that out this next week or so. And if you're live, we're on LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Encourage you to jump in with your questions, your comments. Would love to hear from our audience, any questions you may have as we engage in this really, what I think will be a rich conversation. And if you're not watching live, you can also listen to this as a podcast wherever you consume podcasts. So, Casey, let me get us started. For our audience, why don't you start with a brief intro, a little about how, where you've been, what you've done, and how you've gotten to here.
Sure, happy to. So I'm Casey Foss. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer presently at West Monroe, and I've been at West Monroe for almost 16 years. West Monroe, for frame of reference, when I joined was 5 years old. It was 125 people and 26 million in revenue. And we've grown to over 2,000 people in my time there and just under $1 billion in revenue. And so a lot of growth, right, David? And one of the things that you talked about that I found so interesting in the intro is this concept of repeatability. People skip past because they go on to the next thing, right? And that was really the impetus for why we created the commercial growth team and the commercial officer role at West Monroe was, how do we ratify and orient our teams on these problems that our clients face over and over and over again and solve them in a very repeatable way so that we can anticipate the value we're going to deliver back to them. In my time at West Monroe, I focused a lot on go-to-market strategy. I'm extremely passionate about what matters to our clients. So it was a natural shift from serving as the firm's CMO into this role and kind of taking our services and what we do to the next level.
I was fascinated in our previous conversation about you've been there as long as you have, because that's not the norm, right? You see a lot of executives have coffee stops at various jobs. I think you said you've been there like 15 years or so?
Yeah, so I've been here for 15 years. And I think as I just hit on, we've grown so much in my time that it's a different organization. And I started in the organization as a marketer to building the marketing function to the CMO to this seat. So the job is always different and the work to be done is always different. How we tell our story is always different. And what's so interesting to me about the professional services space and why I stay is you're marketing the people. And when you're inspired and motivated by the individuals, the job becomes easy. And if you're telling them a story that they believe in and they're in the boat with you, you have 2,000 walking billboards to tell the story for you, right? Because there's no better marketability than having your people really believe in what you're building.
And before I turn it to Jenn to ask the next question, the transition from CMO to Chief Commercial Officer, was that a big leap? And what do you do as a Chief Commercial Officer?
Yeah, so it was interesting. It was an interesting transition, right? Because we backfilled my role to hire somebody to replace me as the CMO because marketing and brand building is so important. And so it's always interesting to be in an organization while there's change in leadership and somebody coming in and doing your role. The other thing that was really eye-opening is once you get into the work itself and telling 2,000 consultants to change or try something different in how they deliver client work, then you're in their business, right? And so the reaction is much different than launching a marketing program or a campaign. And so it was definitely a transition. I think the firm over time has started to see that there's value in the repeatability and the focus on and how you can anticipate the value that you're going to leave behind for clients becomes much easier to sell the work, to conceptualize what buyers need to do. So that was kind of the transition. The what do you do, Casey, is a question I get all the time as the Chief Commercial Officer. And the high level answer is I commercialize what we do, which is to say I productize it. We're not a product firm, but we take services and we make them product-like. We constantly iterate on them. We constantly improve them. We constantly adjust what we do. So we take that product mindset, but we do focus on 9 core industries because we fundamentally believe that knowing the value chain of those industries allows you to know the whole problem and solve it end to end. And once you can do that for one mid-market bank, you can do it for the next mid-market bank and the next mid-market bank, learning from our experience so they don't make the same mistakes.
Love it. Love it.
So Casey, for those who aren't familiar with West Monroe and kind of the company and the work that you all do, can you just give a brief overview of what West Monroe does and those industries that you do serve?
Yes. So West Monroe is a 21-year-old digital services firm. We're headquartered in Chicago, but we have offices across the United States and we serve mostly US-based clients. We do have a global footprint with offices in London, and we have nearshore resources in Latin America focused on development and technology. We serve 25% of the Fortune 100, 45 of the top 100 private equity firms. We started and continue to focus on the upper mid-market primarily because we think that that market is underserved and continues to be. But so when I say West Monroe is a digital services firm, I want to just hit on, for me, what that really means is the art of becoming digital, thinking and defining a vision for how they compete against new digital organizations, changing the way they work, deploying new data and technology. And so if you look at the slide that is up, we really think about an organization's digital maturity across a digital agility model. They have to have the right vision to compete against new and unknown or unforeseen digital first competitors. They have to have the right products and experiences to bring that vision to life. But they can't do that without accessing and using the right data or technology. And they have to lean into that data and technology to truly understand what their clients want and understand the choices that their clients have. And then it's all about these agile business operations, right? So we really think about it soup to nuts. And the rationale for that is because we want to make sure that our buyers are thinking about the holistic experience of their employees and their customers. That's truly how we think about it. And you have a lot of competitors out there who will build a vision for you, they'll launch a product for you, but they don't think about the whole thing. And that's the gap.
And on that, you also serve very specific kind of industry. So, and I really appreciate last conversation between kind of the traditional versus digital, because Casey, I don't want to say I'm jaded, but you know, a lot of people talk about digital transformation. I don't know about you. I always scratch my head like, what does that mean? Is that just lipstick on a pig, or is that somebody's pet project? Or you guys think about digital very differently, and you kind of bring that subject matter expertise to really transform the business model, the go-to-market strategy. Is that fair?
Yeah, we think about how digital technology, digital ways of working, digital mindset can impact every aspect of your business. And so I love this slide as a way of thinking about how you take to level set. We work in industries that are either highly regulated or have been doing things the same way for a very long time: banking, utilities, healthcare providers and payers. And they have very traditional ways of operating. Decision-making has historically been very hierarchical. It's based on gut feel. If you think about a consumer and industrial product shop, right? Like it's the manager walking around the floor making calls on when the product should be kicked off or shipped. Whereas in a digital operating model, it's decentralized, data-driven, algorithmic where it can be, right? And you're putting the customer at the center of this entire experience. And so when we talk to buyers to make it more tangible, for every process we talk about or every team we look at, it's how do you move them from this left side of this graphic to the right? And everybody's on a different spot in their digital journey, and everybody is thinking about digital different, right? Some people associate digital with marketing or with product. And we think about, I always talk about like the steak versus the sizzle. We think about the meat of what it is and making sure that you have the right foundation versus the flashy tech or sexiest product. It's both.
I just a quick follow-up question on that. Would you also say that some of this digital transformation is combination of mindset and culture? Because if we get the wrong, if we get the right leader to think that we're going to think and lead differently, and we're going to bring the culture and activate this army that believes we can evolve, then that transformation becomes a heck of a lot easier. Conversely, you get the wrong mindset and you get a not invented here culture, we're not going anywhere.
100%. I actually compare it, David, to a lifestyle change, like an athlete, right? I ride my Peloton every morning, and that does not mean that tomorrow I can wake up and ride in the Tour de France, right? I would have to change how I eat, change how I sleep, change how I manage my stress. And you have to think about it holistically, and it's forever, right? It's not a fad diet where I'm going to cut carbs for a week, lose a ton of weight, get faster on my bike and move on. It is a whole new lifestyle, and it never ends, right? Like that's part of one of the things that we instill in buyers is on your digital journey, you're never done. And you're never done innovating. You're never done looking at new trends, and you're never done launching products and services that will delight your employees and customers.
Yeah, David and I have talked about in past episodes, like your go-to-market strategy, it can't ever be a set it and forget it. Your tech stack isn't a set it and forget it. Like you constantly have to be evolving those things. And so that's a great point that it's like a lifestyle change. You mentioned in your previous comment that you work in highly regulated industries. So like what are some key trends that are just overarching kind of across those markets and those sectors that you serve?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think right now in today's environment, trends really are pervasive. I think there's three main things that are kind of pervasive across industries. The first one is a little bit of what I just leaned in on. Industries can no longer stay in their lane. An industry or an organization is always, in my opinion, one innovation away from complete market disruption. And if you're not leaning into innovation by digitizing your business, you're waiting to be disrupted or left behind, right? Historically, if you think back to like in the 1950s, right, a company lasted for 61 years on the S&P 500. In 2016, it was only 24 years. And it's forecasted to be 12 years by 2027. That's because there's new market entrants constantly disrupting. And so one of the things that we focus a lot on is how do you take the macro level changes in B2C industries and force those into other industries that are in B2B that like healthcare or utilities, learning from Amazon, where they never would have in the past. That's one of the big ones that kind of cuts across industries. The second one that I always hit on, and again, I think this one cuts across industries, is the symbiotic relationship between technology and customer trust. And for me, this is so important because the client-company relationship is the one that directly impacts the bottom line, right? And the example that I always give here to our internal teams and to the clients that I talk to is I point back to kind of the Southwest example from the holiday operational meltdown, if you will, right? Resulting in over $1 billion of lost revenue. And you think about, they spent a lot of time focusing on the app and the interface, but not so much the back-end technology, right? Not investing the $1.3 billion that they have to now on IT maintenance and upgrades. And so the thing that I always say is like, you have to ensure that, and this goes back to the steak for sizzle, you have to ensure that you're investing in the right back-end technology to keep your operations running, because in the Southwest example, passengers won't care if the app works if they can't get on the airplane, right? Like that, like maintaining the core service that you provide is super important. And then the last trend really quickly is there's just a lot of new workforce needs. And this is top of mind across every industry, right? Layoffs across the country and new workforce trends and new ways of working are changing where top tech talent is going. It used to be that there were traditional tech companies that absorbed all of the tech talent. And now these organizations are losing that talent to banks and financial services, consulting, healthcare. And we've really got to make sure that they're not only acquiring that talent, but putting them to the best use and thinking about the right use cases for them.
Casey, I want to thank you for that. I want to double click on something you said about industries and companies can't stay in their lane. Real innovation versus what I call innovation theater, where somebody comes up with a pet project or it's really same thing, just a different lens on it, is an investment that takes a runway, that takes patient capital, that takes patient and prudent leadership to see it really pay off. What's the propensity you're seeing with your clients to make those prudent bets? But in essence, they're bets, right? You're playing the venture capital game of we're going to make 10 bets knowing 8 will go nowhere, but the 2 that hit are going to be the future of our business. So what is the propensity you're seeing for investments in real innovation so they'll remain relevant and they're not going to get disrupted if an Amazon decides to get into banking or insurance, or nobody thought they'll be in the grocery business, right? So give us some lens into kind of what you're seeing with clients in terms of investing in real innovation.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question in today's market, right? In that you have to be focused on the near-term validity of your business more now than ever. But if you forget about the long-term, you're at risk, right? And so I think what we're seeing a lot of the C-suite executives that our clients focus on is, how do I innovate some of the more pragmatic, tactical, tangible processes, systems, products that we have deployed today versus reinventing the future? And so I don't think innovation is lost in today's market or environment, but I think it's more tightly confined. And I think the other thing we're seeing is they're looking for quick wins, right? How do you focus more on outcome-based milestones while you're innovating, so the innovation doesn't have this long runway that doesn't produce results for months on end, and then you have to pull out of it, right? It's really how do you focus on those milestones and make sure that you're iterating along the way and continuing to refine your innovation based on customer and employee feedback.
Love it.
So we talked just a little bit about how you're helping companies move from traditional sort of methodologies into that digital transformation and the reimagining of how they do business. So what particularly unique facets of that do you find that companies most struggle with, but also where are you seeing that they're just picking up really quick and moving into that sort of new stage easily?
That's a great question. I think, so I think everybody wants to do this, right? So the state of mind and the desire to move is there. I would say David hit on one of the biggest issues, which is if leadership is saying we should move from traditional to digital ways of working, but are still very hierarchical in how they make decisions, or still keep their employees in silos by function versus pod and cross multidisciplinary teams, they're not going to enable the environment for it. So that's one. And that change is hard to do. I think a lot of people think if I buy the right technology, I'm good to go, but it's changing. It's really changing how you work and how you use that. That's the first one. The other one that I continue to hit on a lot with our buyers is data. And I know Gen AI is a topic that we'll probably get to later, but it's everywhere. But if you're not data fluent, if you don't have access to the right data, if you don't have the right systems in place, none of the rest of that can come. And so I think, to me, getting foundational data, skills, and insights is going to be key to the future of moving people from one side to the other.
Just quick question. I mean, a lot of companies with COVID and everything else, they had to go fully remote. There are companies that are remote first, and there's other companies that have now adopted this sort of dual environment for their workforce. Are you finding it that companies who are sort of remote first or remote friendly can handle the digital transformation easier? Or are you seeing where teams are co-located, those teams are able to adopt it more quickly?
I think, so I think that digital first companies have a different space or avenue for collaboration and creation that puts everybody on equal footing. I personally do not think that there is any substitute for in-person collaboration. And so even if you're a digital first company, making sure that there's retreats and summits and ways to get your teams together, the energy and new idea generation that comes in that space is huge. I also think that the people being impacted the most are those newer to the workforce. Not being able to walk in and out of a room, or not being able to grab somebody in the hallway and, hey, you said this, can you explain? I just think there's so much learning and mentorship lost in today's environment. So without those, even if you are digital first, without those in-person gatherings, I think you're going to fall behind.
This episode brought to you by Relationship Economics, where it's a fabulous. No, I
promise I wasn't paid for that plug.
Right? The paid promotion was. No, Casey, you're exactly right. And Jen and I have talked about. I don't know if you noticed, she chuckled when he said some clients buy tech and they think instantaneously that's going to solve a lot of the problems.
Right.
And you're exactly right. We also deeply believe, beyond the conveniences of not having to deal with the commute and all that, and being remote, fully remote, there's just something to be said for walking down the hall and just pulling quickly 2-3 people together to put your ideas around kind of a challenge or an opportunity. For our audience, if you've just joined us, you're listening to Casey Foss, the Chief Commercial Officer at West Monroe, and we're talking about really investing in repeatability. So there's a lot of talk about transforming the business model, the go-to-market strategy to be a lot more digital, repeatable, predictable, dashboards, insights. We will talk about AI and ML shortly. I'm always curious, and I scratch my head. What does that mean exactly? How are you thinking and leading differently? And what will you choose to double down on to really benefit from the end results of that? So Casey, on that note, talk about the strategic value of this multidisciplinary teams that you guys kind of take in. So you bring both, obviously, the technical digital expertise, but also industry or vertical or sector domain expertise who really understand the challenges that client or that functional group is facing.
Yeah. So as we think about solving client issues, we fundamentally believe that understanding the industry is key, right? You can build a product, but if you don't understand the entirety of the value chain, you don't understand the downstream impacts that product is going to have on the rest of the business, whether that be the employees, the systems, how the customers engage with the brand. And so you're spot on. We have what we consider multidisciplinary as industry expertise. And we bring in to West Monroe people who've spent 25 plus years in the banking industry. It's not they've been consultants to banking. They are former bankers. We have functional expertise, meaning how do you design the customer experience? What do you think about the operations? How do you do change management, human capital management? And then there's the technology. And the technology could be custom products. It could be platforms. It could be access to and use of data and helping organizations build analytics as a capability. It runs the gamut, and we really design these teams. We listen first to, okay, what is the industry issue that this specific client is facing? How do you make sure that no stakeholder is left behind because you're thinking about it holistically? And that's really what allows for that kind of different approach to delivery from strategy. You build a strategy that you know can be implemented because you actually have the technologists who would implement it.
Yeah, we see that all the time with clients where they either are buying a technology that thinks is going to solve maybe the human capital problem, and just plug in that tool, it'll take care of it. No, that's not really how that works. So yeah, creating a strategy that then can actually be implemented and then tracked and changed and iterated upon is absolutely essential in creating value.
Well, and Jenn, on that note, one of the examples that I always give to people that I think it makes it tangible that we all lived through in COVID was curbside pickup, right? There's firms out there that would have looked at a restaurant and said, you know, you should really think about different ways to get your food out the door, and curbside pickup could be an option. Or there's firms that would build an app that would allow for better ordering and timing for pickup. And the way that West Monroe would have approached a problem like that is, okay, if you need to do different food, getting food out of the restaurant, how do you do that differently? How do you organize the parking lot? How do you hire differently? How do you train your resources differently? Does the app need to, and how does that whole physical and digital experience interconnect to provide value?
I love that example. So you mentioned with the multidisciplinary teams that some leaders are also looking for those quick wins. Like in what ways is West Monroe helping clients see that fast value creation?
Yeah, so it varies across industry. I'll give one example. So we've talked a lot about tech, right? And so in the industries we serve, technology is usually at the core of the problem. It's not how you solve the problem, but it's at the core, right? And so an example would be, we had a rapidly growing health plan reach out to us. They needed to modernize their core technology and improve their operations. It needed scalable data. It lacked the data, and that was preventing them from client insights, helping them drive strategic decisioning, right? They had tech debt. The list goes on. And very quickly, within months, not years, we allowed them access to data, better data quality, thinking about how they could run reports and analyses faster, easier, and even automated. And all of that enabled growth by scaling their data processes, right? The priority was to move them in a measurable way, though. If you remember, we started this, I said, it's all about financial value, right? And so we wanted to, if we got you access to data and we set up new systems, if we are not giving you measurable impact at a very fast clip, we're not doing our jobs well. And so the idea was, how do we deliver an ROI of 2.5 times over the next 5 years, right? And that project ran, again, for months, and then the outcomes were over the long run. And so I think it's, how do you paint that long-term picture, and then how do you have iterative wins along the way?
We've all seen what I call initiative fatigue, right? If you don't get that return quickly, if it's not a short-term hit, it just feels like it's dragging on. Like, is there an end in sight of when are we going to get this thing done? Or, good Lord, I used to have more hair. For our audience, there was a lot more hair, and sitting through ERP implementations or CRM implementations or new supply chain systems, it's just like, it's going to drag on. And I think, and Casey, I'd welcome your comment. I think increasingly leadership teams and boards have less of a patience for that kind of a long drawn out versus the quick hits, versus the quick value creation that you brought up.
Right. Well, and I think it's also the pre-work to build that business case, right? So like we do a ton of work, as you know, in the private equity industry. And before you even get started, right, during diligence, we look at a target company's transactional, operational, and financial data to help the PE firm understand what potential EBITDA expansion there might be. And oftentimes that's then put into to underwrite their bid, right, on the organization. And so they're signing up for it. And then quickly after close, it's how do you do those things piecemeal so you can get quick wins along the way.
Yeah. So talking about investing, dive into that repeatability. How do you ensure that clients we work with and we implement a new digital go-to-market, new digital approach to something, comes with processes that they can in fact replicate and they can continue to get ongoing value from, versus, hey, thanks for the transaction, good luck, let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
So talk about the why, the where, the how do you ensure long tail value creation from that repeatability?
Yeah, so I think a few things. The first is, the reason we focus on repeatability is because we believe that buyers in consulting have been cheated out of value. In no other industry do you pay, if I was to hire somebody to build me a house, I would never walk away and be like, oh, they skipped 2 bedrooms, but I guess that's okay because they got most of it done, right? Like in no other industry, but in consulting, it happens all the time. So much so that Source Global Research, who does a ton of research on consulting firms, will tell you that 50% of buyers of consulting either say that the value is greater than the fees they paid. The rest was either at or lower. And lower is like painful, right? If you're spending money. And so our goal was to say, we want every client to see the value that they paid and then some. And to do that, being able to anticipate the value and promise it up front became very important, right? We're going to do this work. We've seen it play out at a lot of organizations just like yours. And so I'll give an example in the banking space because I think that it'll help bring it to life. I said earlier, we focus on specific industries because they have the same issues over and over, right? So mid-market banks all face the same problems with these laborious loan origination processes. We leaned into a partnership with nCino and developed a solution that was highly repeatable for the banks and for West Monroe to help deploy. It created value very quickly by taking manual workflows and making them digital and automated so that they could speed up the process by which they generate the loans. And we improved the workflow by up to 40% for commercial loans and 70% for treasury management and cash management. And then when clients take that a step farther and think of, okay, how do you apply this to credit process optimization or my operating model in totality, we were able to get them 15 to 20% more capacity within their ecosystem. So it's taking what we know works and going from group to group within this mid-market bank and then from bank to help them generate more success. And we learn as we go, and the bank learns as they go, and it kind of continues to improve over time. And so that's really how, when we invest in repeatable offerings, we take this problem that we know is relevant across the industry, and we really hone a very specialized offering to solve that in a repeatable fashion.
And as I recall from my notes in our last conversation, didn't that also improve both the employee experience because easier handoffs between different groups, but also I wrote down the customer experience. The loans got approved faster.
Right. We're talking like days versus weeks and months. And if you think about it, like people used to take a stack of papers from one spot in an office and walk it to another spot in the office and wait for them to be approved. Right. And so it's just, and systematic changes like that we're doing in banking. You talk about learning from one industry to the next, apply to claims processing in the healthcare industry, right? And so there's a lot of applicability and consistency that allows you to learn from other industries as you're deploying the technology. But very simply said, David, to make something repeatable and the results last, it is about thinking about that circle that we had up at the beginning. What is the tool? What is the tech? How does it relate to the customers? You think about it holistically, that's how it sticks.
Love that. So we briefly touched on that you do some work with private equity, and mergers and acquisitions are a big thing with all the new offerings out. Companies are gobbling up other ones. So in that space and in private equity and VC, like what are things that you are most excited about and the developments there?
Yeah, I think with a lull in transaction activity, we're seeing our clients focus a lot on their current portfolio and how they improve the portfolio companies. They're very excited about generative AI and new technologies and quick wins from a value creation opportunity perspective that technology can bring into every industry. And so as you think about PE firms and managing their portfolio of organizations, it's really seen as a positive disruptor, how they think about tech and specifically generative AI in one space and take it to the next space and the next space. And so we're excited because we think as deal volume returns later this year, early next year, it's really going to amplify what portfolio companies are ready and how they're driving forward.
Yeah, the portcos are fascinating. They're all looking at their product offerings. They're all looking at the market segments they're in. How do we, a friend of ours, Randy Seidel, talks about SEAT, sell everything on the truck. How do we go deeper with our existing customers, but also go expand our customer base if we roll up or if we integrate a couple of other similar players in our space, which is always fascinating from the PE standpoint.
Right. Well, and access to data is allowing the PE firms to do that in a way that they haven't before, right? It's access to data to understand what customers we might acquire that look like these that we can continue to grow.
So we've mentioned it several times on this call or in this conversation, but generative AI and how it's relevant to repeatability. What are your thoughts?
So generative AI is everywhere and nowhere. It is my my very real answer. I think 70% of the organizations we talk to are in exploration mode, right? They know that they need to pay attention to it, but I feel like a lot of our buyers and companies that I've talked to across the board or other providers of Gen AI services, we talk about how many organizations are stuck in this kind of proof of concept purgatory, if you will. They don't know where to start. They're focused on a tool versus a problem. And when you focus on a tool and you have limited data availability or fluency to actually make change, you're really not going to get the most impactful return for the business. And so we've really focused on models plus your data and how that drives results and helps you think about the art of the possible, right? Like, how do you create predictive customer segmentation? Can you do contract analysis that will influence negotiations? Can you use conversational chatbots to digest your data and serve up insights so that you can actually act on it? I think the thing that I really believe is that generative AI is going to make our lives easier. It's going to be a great assistant, if you will. But human beings need to be that interface. They need to understand, they need to have the right employees building models, instructing the models, because we won't get the value out of it without the human.
I heard an executive say, right now we've got more pilots going on than United Airlines. just because, as you said, there's so much curiosity about beyond ChatGPT and the more pedestrian or retail versions of it. It's how can we really think about our business differently with large language models? And I think there's so much curiosity around it. But I love your notion of, a lot of people are pursuing the tool and not fundamentally what redundant or just labor intensive business problem we're facing that we could elevate, amplify, enhance through that. Talking about that, can you talk about how you and maybe your executive peers, Casey, are thinking about continuing to think and lead differently in times of just this continued uncertainty? So you and I had this great conversation, incremental growth will come. Where do you guys see that next big leap in growth? Where do you see that transformative opportunity with the middle market clients you work with?
I think there's some examples, David, of how you use these tools. So I was at a conference a year ago and a woman said something that has stuck with me ever since. She was like, technology, and I think generative AI falls in this space, will eliminate the dull, dirty, and dangerous work and allow us to all work on higher value work. And I think that is perfectly said. And so to me, it's thinking through the exact use case that will eliminate that type of work so that your humans are spending time on higher value things. That's really where I see our clients spending time. So I'll give a really quick, high level example from the consumer and industrial product space, right? if you think about, we've done supply chain optimization for buyers for years, but now these tools allow us the opportunity to pull in routes, data, traffic, maps, like things that we had never fathomed in the past, to generate optimal supply chain routes and schedules to minimize cost and maximize efficiency. That's like the true way to rethink and upend your business, right? And how do you, another example in the banking space, similar to what we just said, is how do you use a tool that ingests relevant application documents and analyzes those for missing information so that you don't have a human on the back end having to do that, right? How do you find those sweet spots and really eliminate the type of work that is not fulfilling to your employees and not valuable to your customers?
And in thinking about some of the industry sectors you guys work within, I mean, utilities, healthcare, there is, God bless them, but there is a lot of that dull and some of that dangerous work that really, it's not, it doesn't light a fire inside anybody to get them excited about either the stacks of paperwork or just, the redundant stuff. So it seems like there's a lot of opportunities if you identify that as low-hanging fruit to really optimize, really enhance with a repeatable, predictable process.
100%. I think the other thing, though, is to do that successfully, David, you have to separate the fundamentals from the fads, right? Like right now, we've talked a lot about this on today's show. The rapid fire pace of technical change right now can be easy to get caught up in the hype or the buzzword or the board being like, hey, we need this Gen AI thing, right? Versus we need to solve this problem and generative AI might be a solution. And so while you need to pay attention and be agile and listen, you can't lose sight of the fundamentals or what really matters to your buyers. I think it all comes down to that. And I think that's the same kind of business issue that companies have grappled with for years, right? Is how do you remain focused and on strategy and not get distracted by what your competitor is doing over here, the latest technology over there.
Just a quick follow-up on that. I went to a CEO gathering here in town that was really led by some really sharp people around, it was like generative AI for CEOs, right? And I love that there's a Georgia Tech professor who built a case, and the guy spent time at Google and a bunch of other places, and said, used an example. He said, let's just say I got a job as a press person for Tesla, and my first project is I've got to put a investor deck or presentation to the board of our performance. And he did. Over 15 minutes, he went and got the data and created a presentation, and it was really slick. And the punchline was, guess what? All this information is wrong. And I just got fired because there's just so much uncertainty and so much that's unknown. It is going to take a culture of experimentation to identify business problems and fundamental organizational challenges or opportunities to then look for Gen I, processes, platforms, capabilities to kind of address. One more question, follow up before I let Jen ask hers. Talent. As outsiders, Casey, one of our challenges, we can lead the client to water. We can never make them drink, right? So it takes a special kind of talent to be curious, ask intelligent questions, do your due diligence, recommend options, kind of be that Sherpa, be that guide, and yet don't take it personally and don't let your ego get in the way if the client chooses a different direction. How are you guys doing with talent? Talk about talent challenges and opportunities.
Yeah, so I think to your point on you can only lead them so far, right? One of the things that we really have leaned into as we work, and this again comes into play in this hybrid work world, is being in the trenches with our clients, rolling up our sleeves and actually doing the work with them. And so you asked, how do you know that you're going to deliver the value? Because we don't just give them the report of anticipated value. So for example, we spend a lot of time in the healthcare space helping organizations build high-performing product organizations. Now, these are organizations that used to build an app and set it and forget it, and they didn't continually improve it based on what their patients' needs were, and now they are. And so it's getting that team to think with a product mindset. It's doing the work with them side by side, and then ideally helping them to set up the processes for them to maintain that when they go. So that's part of how we do it. I think the other part, though, is it's more important now than ever as you're acquiring new talent to, in my opinion, think about the utility player, somebody who can go deep enough in tech and understand the technology, but has the relationship skills, right, to make change and drive change into the organization, and is willing to actually understand the business complexities, how the business makes money, spends money, so that we're deploying the technology and creating the processes that will create value. So it's, you really need that kind of athlete, if you will.
Makes perfect sense. So if you were someone listening to this podcast that's a P&L leader that's either watching or listening, what's one thing that you would suggest to them to elevate their digital acumen, their perspective, their willingness to lead differently in this arena?
So Jenn, I'm a consultant, so I'm going to give you two. The first is, and I've said this a few times, I would start with the stake. It's really important to not get distracted by the shiny new objects or the sexiest use case. You need to invest in the foundation first. That's kind of, if you walk away with nothing else, to me, it's, if you're not taking a pragmatic approach to everything that's being deployed in the market right now, you're not going to get to the value. Which really leads into the second. I think reviewing and identifying opportunities to drive incremental value has to come through data, commercial, operational, financial data that puts aside individual stakeholder agendas and allows you to really find where there's the greatest opportunity. Those two things to me are the most important.
Love it. Love it. For our audience, if you missed it, you missed a good one. You missed an intelligent growth session. You missed a good one. I'm just putting it out there. Casey Foss is the Chief Commercial Officer at West Monroe. And just as a, again, quick reminder, we're live every Tuesday. And for our audience, if you haven't seen our customer lifecycle journey, Jenn and I and our team spend a lot of time really thinking and helping clients think through the relationships they build inside and outside the organization and how they go from creating awareness and engagement all the way through evaluation. We coach a lot of clients. The relationship really starts after they buy. So then how do you help them adopt? How do you create impact, material impact? And only then do you earn the right for them to evangelize on your behalf. And the coolest part about this is, you know, we've partnered with a great partner company called Versalytics, and we've built a scorecard where not just qualitative data, but we can also now get quantitative data. And whether you're expanding, whether you're concerned with, PwC does their annual survey of CEOs, and the threat to the top line continues to be a big challenge for a number of organizations. And we're huge believers of, you already have some great relationships that you're leaving neglected. So how do we go back and look at a deeper, whether you're expanding, whether you're optimizing, you're integrating, you're transforming the business model, those relationships are invaluable. In this session, we've been talking a lot about this idea of investing in repeatable processes. And as you heard from Casey's comments, Jenn's insights, it is, we believe, the path. These are steps to repeatable, scalable, profitable growth, and very much like a target practice. I can create accurate, repeatable. I can create not accurate, but repeatable. I can create accurate, not repeatable, and I can certainly create no accuracy and not repeatability. So really important to think about the business cases. Really think about, again, Jenn and I often walk in and, rightfully so, shiny new object. We get excited about a tool, and as Casey mentioned, the processes, the capabilities get left behind. And the tech stack is what a lot of people get excited about, and it's a missed opportunity. So on behalf of our team, again, we're passionate about relationships. We're passionate about helping to convey those relationships. Jenn, briefly about your RevOps practice.
Yeah, it's really focused on digitally transforming your business and helping you elevate your capabilities and tech stack to mirror and grow the business in an intelligent way.
And on that note, again, the amplified time to impact, likewise, not just our opinion, but a scorecard that is as descriptive of where you are as prescriptive of where we believe you need to get to. And as Casey mentioned, we're also seeing an enormous value in data hygiene, data maturity, data capabilities, data visualization. And that's a big part of what our team focuses on as well. So, Casey, on our team's behalf, thank you for making the time to join us. Great to have you. And for our audience, we're live every Tuesday at noon Eastern. So, hope you'll come back and join us then. Thanks, everybody. All the best. See you next time.